Hey everyone, welcome back to Room 237, and this is going to kick off a series of reviews that I've talked about for months and months and just have never got around to. As far as franchises, big franchises, this is probably my favorite franchise. Old, new, whatever. I'm going to start with the Reboot Trilogy just because I watched these most recently. But, so yeah, I'm a huge fan of Planet of the Apes. Everything Planet of the Apes. I wasn't always. In fact, the first one I saw was the Tim Burton movie when it first came out. I think I was 8 or 9 years old when that came out. And I didn't like it then. I still don't like it. So, since that was my first exposure, I just never gave a crap about Planet of the Apes. I also was never a huge sci-fi fan. Never really got into Star Wars, never got into Star Trek, still not really. And Planet of the Apes was always one of the big three sci-fi franchises, along with Star Wars and Star Trek. But when this came out, when I first saw the trailer for this in the summer of 2011, I thought it looked awesome. And I liked the different direction it was going in from what I had seen from the original series. I liked that it looked more like apes than humanoid apes, even though I love the design of these apes now. I love the idea of just them wreaking havoc on the city, San Francisco. I went to theaters to see it, had a great time, and I've loved this movie ever since. And it has kicked off what I think is one of the few perfect trilogies I've ever seen, and that is Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I really do consider this to be a perfect trilogy. Now, Godfather is still my favorite trilogy, but unlike Godfather, this gets better with each film, and because this is my favorite, and has a very satisfying conclusion. Whereas Godfather, it goes 1, 2, and then 3. I still need to watch Coda, but even Dark Knight trilogy, that has its ups and downs. Whereas this, really all the problems I have are in this, but they're forgivable. And then it just gets better. Even the effects, especially the effects, get better to a satisfying, very satisfying conclusion. And it starts with Rise. Now, obviously, when the original series ended, and I think it was 1973. I think that was when Battle came out. I think Battle came out in 1973. I could be wrong. Oh, it says right here. Yeah, 3. They had two live-action television series, an animated series in the 70s, and then Tim Burton's reimagining came out, which I do own. I just didn't pull it. That didn't do very well other than for the effects. And they were hoping it was going to do well enough to start a whole new series. So it seemed like Planet of the Apes was just going to be this classic sci-fi series destined to stay in the past. But then 20th Century Fox had the right writers, the right director, the right actors, and the right intentions to come out with this. It was directed by Rupert Wyatt, making it the only one in this trilogy not to be directed by Matt Reeves, future Batman director. That looks awesome. And it stars James Franco, John Lithgow, Frieda Pinto, Brian Cox, Tom Felton, appears by, I did say Brian Cox, and of course the absolute Marlon Brando, Jack Nicholson of, Al Pacino, Daniel Day-Lewis of motion capture acting, Andy Serkis. This guy has done everything from playing Smeagol, Gollum, whichever, from Lord of the Rings. I was never a big fan of Lord of the Rings either. King Kong and Peter Jackson's King Kong. Snoke in the newer Star Wars. And Caesar in this trilogy. And the guy is phenomenal. Because this isn't just CGI, it's motion capture, which I think allows the actors to emote and use their body a bit more. And even though this was really state-of-the-art, impressive CG effects at the time, I will say they haven't held up. A lot of scenes in this, you can tell, are very dated CGI. It doesn't kill the movie for me, but they really perfected it with these two, especially this. I will say War for the Planet of the Apes is the most stunning and convincing CGI motion capture effects I've ever seen in my life. I love this movie to death. But I mean, it's 10 years old. The way technology is always advancing, it's going to look that way. It's not, and even though this is the reboot series, I know the writers and producers were saying their goal was, if they could keep making movies, make them up to as close as they can get to, in timeline, the original Charlton Heston film. So it technically is a reboot series, or a prequel reboot series. And it does take story elements from, but not being a complete remake of the fourth and fifth films, Conquest and Battle for the Planet of the Apes, which are two of my favorites from this series, because it tells Caesar's story. The rise of apes becoming intelligent, overthrowing humans, and how the human population drops until eventually there's just this epic battle between humans and apes for the fate of the rest of the world. It really, broadens those last two films over a trilogy. And I thought that was the perfect idea. I mean, even the conflict between the apes themselves in Dawn, which I'll get to. So I thought that was the perfect avenue, is to kind of start with what kind of is a reboot, or backtrack and time travel to work forward in this series and use it as a reboot. This is probably going to be a long review. It's already 8.5 minutes, but there's a lot to talk about with this. So with this, it's not so much there was a virus that wiped out cats and dogs, and apes were made into domestic pets that turned slaves. Instead, in this film, it actually opens up in the jungle. We see these apes in their habitat, and then they're picked up by poachers. Well, not really poachers, but they're captured by net from guys on horses, meant to mirror the first appearance of the apes in the original film, with apes on horses capturing humans. This whole trilogy is full of Easter eggs to the original film and series, starting with that. They're catching chimps for this scientific testing facility called Genesis, where James Franco plays the scientist named Will Rodman, which some people debated over whether the name Rodman is a callback to Roddy McDowall, who played Cornelius and Caesar. Only Roddy McDowall's real name was Roderick, So many people believe, if anything, it's an homage and tribute to Rod Serling, creator of Twilight Zone, who wrote the screenplay for the original film. He's trying to develop some sort of new medicine that can improve cognitive thinking to cure Alzheimer's, which is something we've seen before. Even Deep Blue Sea with the sharks try to create this cure for Alzheimer's that made test subjects highly intelligent and fight back. But here, they test on this one female chimp that they call Bright Eyes, a callback to what Zira calls Charlton Heston in the original film before he can speak. She calls him Bright Eyes. You know, her cognitive capabilities just were off the charts. So, of course, during this big meeting where he's going to pitch the results and get the okay for human trials from the board members, Bright Eyes goes completely insane. You know, crashes through the whole meeting, appears violent and aggressive, and gets shot by security. Come to find out, she was not being aggressive as a side effect. She was being protective over her newborn baby that was in her cell, I guess. Which is one of my problems with this film, is you have a group of scientists that are closely monitoring her every day. They didn't know she was pregnant. They didn't know she gave birth. I mean, they had to take vitals and stuff. They couldn't tell that she was pregnant. It's one of the plot holes of this film, but I forgive it. It's one I've always had with this. So the head of Genesis, Stephen Jacobs, which even his name was is a callback to the original series producer, Arthur Jacobs. He orders all chimps to be put down. They were all put down except for this newborn baby. The chimp handler, Franklin, who was actually Dale from Tucker and Dale versus Evil. His name was also based on someone. Anyway. So he says, I can't put this baby down. James Franco takes him home. And we find out his father, played by John Lithgow, has Alzheimer's. And that's sort of his driving force to finding this cure. John Lithgow takes a liking to the baby chimp. And he sees that his eyes have turned green. Some people think it's a callback to Caesar's green suit in Conquest. I think that's a bit of a stretch. I think it's more of just a scientific side effect. Or to make him more human appearing, I guess. And so, like, the next day, he's like 2 days old, he's feeding himself with the bottle. And that's when James Franco realizes that the ALZ-112 drug had been passed down genetically from mother to son. And where he doesn't have he doesn't have a cognitive pattern that needs to be improved. He's excelling at a naturally a fast rate. Like he's all like with chimps, they have to make them smarter, or the capability to learn better and then be able to learn easier. With him, it's just because he doesn't have the repair factor, I guess. So James Franco keeps him, and over the course of the years, he just is becoming crazy smart. He learns sign language, wears clothes, like sweatpants and a sweatshirt. And then this goes up until he's 8 years old. The film opens up in 2008. The main events take place in 2016, so near future at the time this came out. And of course, everyone except James Franco is the epitome of why humanity is awful. They have this one neighbor who chases Caesar off with a bat when he's, young, because he's trying to fix the neighbor kid's bike, which chain broke. Which, that guy is just an asshole throughout the whole movie. They keep coming back to him being a dick. Eventually, James Franco treats John Lithgow with the drug so he can prove to Jacobs that it does work. John Lithgow gets much better. And I love John Lithgow. I've always been a big fan of his. And I think this came out after season 4 of Dexter. So this was after he was Trinity. But when I saw this in theaters, I hadn't seen John Lithgow since, like, Shrek when I was a kid. Always been a big fan of John Lithgow. So, and I mean, at this point, he gives Lithgow the drug when Caesar's 3. And then, he meets this woman that works as a vet at the San Francisco Zoo. They start dating. They take Caesar out to the Weir Woods in San Francisco, the redwood forest, so he can climb and get energy out. And they do that for 5 years. Then we get up to present day. Which also, this is when we first see Caesar doing the thing where he bows down and puts his hand out, which he's asking for forgiveness or permission, which James Franco gives him to go climb the trees. So when he's 8, that's when he starts questioning his existence, his role. They're walking back from him climbing the trees in the woods, and they cross a family with a German Shepherd who's on a leash, like he is. And he starts looking at how the dog's on the leash are getting pulled, and how he's getting pulled. The dog's barking at him, and he just kind of snarls at him. He always sits in the back of the station wagon. He opts to sit in the back seat, and that's when he asks Will, through sign language, and Andy Serkis is amazing in this. He asks if he's a pet. Franco says no. He asks who his father is. Franco says he is. And he says, well, what am I? And so that's when Franco takes him to Genesis. He says, this is where I work. Your mother was a test subject, like other chimps. You're so smart because of this drug she was given, but, she protected you, so she was killed. And he kind of has this conflict of his own existence. And around this time, John Lithgow's Alzheimer's has fought off the drug completely and come back with a vengeance. His Alzheimer's is even worse now. Then he gets into the neighbor's car and tries to drive it, and of course wrecks it. The guy hauls Lithgow out, starts yelling at him, pointing at him in the chest, which Caesar is up. He has like it's a bedroom, but it's like a playroom, like for very smart apes. Puzzles and shit up in the attic. And the actually, it's not even on here, is it? I thought it was on one of these. The attic has a round window with like a kind of like a diamond sort of shape, window frame, which becomes an important symbol later on. Caesar's always looking out this window into the outside world, and he kind of starts to feel like a prisoner. But when he sees the guy pointing at Lithgow's chest, he sees the threat, launches out of the house, beats the guy up, chases him down, bites his finger. And then he realizes the animal in him has taken over. Which first I want to back up. When Franco meets the vet at the zoo, is to get stitches after the neighbor hit him with a bat. And I mean, some people will say they don't blame the guy. He found a chip in his garage around his kids. Yes, Franco should have told this guy, hey, I have a chimp and I have a father with Alzheimer's. So if you see my father doing something weird, like getting into your car, don't freak out on him. But then we wouldn't have had this guy being the asshole he needs to be for the movie. So he takes him through the zoo to see this vet so he gets stitches. And I used to dislike the fact that the ape exhibit was all CGI apes in a zoo. It was like you're at a zoo and you have to CGI apes. But now I realize, and especially now where the effects do look dated, I think of it more as if we had CGI apes here and real apes here, especially later on when they're together, it's going to be jarring to see the difference. So all or nothing, it's not as much a problem anymore, but that used to be one of the flaws I had with the film. Now I accept it as, you know, you would have been able to tell the difference. So I do forgive that. I only brought that up in case someone else mentions it. So after attacking the neighbor, Caesar is court-ordered to this primate sanctuary run by Brian Cox. And, you know, he's the guy that runs it, but the one that handles all the chimps. Tom Felton, Malfoy from Harry Potter, of course, playing an asshole. He's brought there, and of course, he's never been around other chimps. These chimps are not Alzheimer's drug treated. They're natural apes. So he gets there, and it's terrifying. It's like Shawshank. I mean, they're all, like, going ape in their cages. He's terrified. He gets beat up at first. I mean, there is one kind of silly part. Well, first, this is also a string of events with the hand and trust. Because when animal control brings him to the primate shelter, they have like the stick with the noose on it. James Franco's like, I'll, you know, take it off him. I'll bring him in. So he takes Caesar by the hand. He's like, it's okay, trust me. So he brings him in. He brings him into like the big play area. Caesar does the hand thing. He's like, you're okay. And then while he's running around, he runs up this simulated mountain, then runs into the wall because it's painted like a sky. And he's like, it's a wall. This is just, you know. And then he sees that the door has been shut. James Franco's on the outside. So, of course, he's banging. It does try to pull on your heartstrings. And maybe being more as dramatic as possible, but I think it works. So he's like banging on the glass. He's like pushing his face up against it, crying. And Franco's like, no, we're not going home. So, and of course, it's small, but the thing with the hands, like, it started out with, he always asked for permission. He always asks, every time Franco has had his hand, like when he got his stitches, he was holding his hand. And now, he had trusted James Franco so complicitly that now he has grabbed his hand in trust and led into this basically Shawshank for apes. But there is this one funny part where he's in like the play area, and there's this one ape who we'll know as Rocket, who's like sitting there, and he's got like one ape kind of like doing his nails, and he's like the king ape. He beats Caesar up. At one point, Caesar's in his room. Well, when he first gets there, he grabs a rock, and he draws the design of the window frame in his bedroom, and he just kind of leans against it and laments for his window. Like, that's his symbol of normalcy again. And that's going to play a big part later. And Tom Felton, Malfoy being an asshole, I mean, he gets this slop for food. He kind of goes like this. He gets on Malfoy's face. He laughs. He gets a fire hose in his cell, sort of playing on how when Charlton Heston got sprayed with the fire hose. But eventually Caesar just starts getting... James Franco keeps coming back for visits. Caesar thinks he's going to go home. James Franco has to keep telling him that they're not going home. And his distrust in humans, again with Malfoy, keeps growing and growing. The first ape that he meets that's friendly is a big orangutan named Maurice. Which the name is a play on the actor that played orangutan Dr. Zaius in the original film, which was Maurice Evans. Oh, and I guess Tom Felton's character, Dodge Landon, named after the other two crew members. That was with Charlton Heston. And so Caesar, of course he's super intelligent. He keeps finding ways to get out of his cell. Like the last time James Franco shows up and says, no, we're not going home, Caesar gets pissed and he I think he rips off his sweatpants, or he grabs like a cloth in his cell and he rubs the window frame design off his wall because he's very upset. And that's when his total distrust in humans has taken over. So then Tom Felton is with a friend and these two girls to hang out, have drinks in there. They're looking at all the other apes. Which they see one named Cornelia, which is a play on Cornelius. Roddy McDowell for the first film. But Caesar grabs his friend, pulls him close, and he gets all like mean mugging. But then he lets go of him, and we see that Caesar stole his pocket knife. So he's able to make this key to get out of his cell. He goes back into the play area where there's this tiny cage with this big-ass silverback named Buck. He lets him out, and he gains the trust of Buck. So then Rocket, the Oz leader, he lets him into the play area, and Buck kind of beats him for Caesar. Caesar shows him mercy. It's like, I'm the leader now. And Caesar keeps finding more ways to get further out of... he finds the lever that will open the dome window in the roof. While this is going on, James Franco tells Jacobs that he treated his father. He's come up with a new strand, like an aerosol, and that it didn't just work. It didn't just cure, it improved. And Jacobs is sort of like the Mr. Krabs of this. He's just the money grubbing at any one, at the expense of any person or chimp. All about the money. So they get more chimps. One of which is a scarred bonobo chimp named Koba, who we'll see throughout the series. But they get their chimps from the primate shelter. So Caesar sees these tags on the bags that they're put in that say Genesis. He knows they're going to be tested on. So one night when he goes through the dome window, he makes it all the way back to James Franco's house. And he goes out in the shed fridge where shed, garage, in the fridge, there's always 2 beers and 2 beers only. But he finds the aerosol cans of the ALZ 113, the new improved one. He takes 2, punctures them, and just rolls them down the walkway of cells of apes, getting them all smart. Now, I know some people will say just because they're now smart doesn't mean they're automatically intelligent. You still got to teach them stuff. I think that's one problem that people had with the movie. But there is a part shortly after where when they're all in the playpen, they're all kind of standing there, and Caesar's standing over here and doing like the huh, huh, huh. And they're kind of chanting back as if they're talking about escape and, you know, Rise of the Apes, essentially. So, I think he is kind of telling them his plan while they're intelligent. And their eyes all turn green as well. Now, at several points, I've brought up callbacks to the original film or the original series. All were kind of seamless. A lot of them were Easter eggs. Like, when John Lithgow was wrecking the neighbor's car, and the neighbor was, you know, being aggressive with him. See, what I didn't say was Caesar was up in his room putting together a 3D model of the Statue of Liberty. Without spoiling it, we all know what the Statue of Liberty is to the Planet of the Apes. But there is one that is that's very cringeworthy. The first one is when Caesar first gets to the sanctuary. And he's seeing all the other apes go crazy because there's this new ape there, as if they're trying to get in at him. And Malfoy is laughing, like, stupid monkey. And then he walks off, the camera pulls back. We hear the apes going crazy, and Tom Felton just goes, "It's a madhouse! It's a madhouse!" Quoting the first film. But the worst one was eventually James Franco shows up because just as he's about to give John Lithgow the new improved drug, Lithgow stops him, as if to say, "I don't want it." He falls asleep and he dies. And James Franco realizes, I can't lose both of them. So he goes down to the sanctuary with an envelope full of money, and he's like, "Give me back my chip." So Brian Cox is like, "All right." So he gives him a leash. And he goes down to Caesar's cell, and he's like, "Come on, we're going home." And he puts his hand out. Caesar walks to the door. He looks at his hand, looks at his face, looks down at his other hand, and sees the leash. And then he looks around at all the other apes. And then there's this great moment where he just takes the cell door, and he just closes it with him behind it. It's like the first time he held his hand out, and Caesar saying, "No, I know what my purpose is." And just to show that he still cares about Franco, he's sitting on like his bed area facing the wall. And the camera is looking at Caesar as James Franco walks away behind him. And Andy Serkis does a great job at just like fighting back the tears and the sadness of having to say goodbye to his father figure, choosing to stay there. I thought that was a powerful moment. And all the other apes are just cheering for him, like you stayed for us. So then he does this one moment where he gets back into the playpen. This is the other cringy moment. Because this is supposed to be 2016, and he's like a teenager. He sees Caesar in the play area. So he goes out there, he's like, yo, get back in your cage. Caesar doesn't move. He's like looking at him. He's like, what's the matter with... And he keeps cattle prodding him. Which James Franco knows they've been abusing apes. He saw Malfoy with the cattle prod, and he threatened to get him shut down. So he keeps cattle prodding him, and then eventually he like goes to hit him, and Caesar catches his arm. And they made Malfoy say, "Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape." It didn't work with him. He didn't sell it. It wasn't believable for some young guy in 2016 or 11 when it came out to say, "Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape." It worked when Charlton Heston said it, because it's the first time he was able to speak in this film. At least to an ape. So that didn't work. But then you have one of my favorite moments of the film where the camera like kind of... It's like one of those moments like it kind of zooms in on Caesar. Like everything goes out of focus in the background. And he's like, "No!" He gets all... And then it's like dead silent. You see the shocked look on Malfoy, the other apes. Hits him in the face with the cattle prod. Doesn't shock him, just hits him. Then he looks at all the other apes that are like cheering, and he's like, "No!" You know, which is a callback to the original series where Cornelius talks about how the first ape to stand up to the humans was named, I think he says Aldo. Like in our history, the first ape to stand up to the humans was the one named Aldo. I know Aldo was the one from Battle as well, but it's like, and the first word that was spoken was no. So they put that in here. I thought that was a great idea and played perfectly. It just sucks it came right after that cringy line of "Take your stinking paws off me." So then they put Tom Felton, Malfoy, in Caesar's cage. They take the other guy who wasn't mean to the apes, which his name is Rodney. Another, is it Rodney McDowell or is it Rod Serling? Caesar gently puts him in a cage. Caesar recognizes he was a good human. But Malfoy gets out, and there's the cattle prod on the floor and a fire hose. And there's Malfoy and Caesar. And they kind of had this showdown. And he grabs the cattle prod, Caesar grabs the hose. And as soon as he charges at him and turns it on, Caesar just sprays him and fries the fuck out of him. And then you get one of my favorite shots of the whole film is when we see that dome window on the roof of the sanctuary just burst and just apes crawling out of it like spiders. Which, that's the shot that was in the trailer that I loved so much, that made me want to see it. And they just start going for the city. And, I mean, they go to the zoo. They free all the not very smart apes from the zoo. They free all the ones from Genesis. Which, while all that stuff's going on with Caesar and the apes at Genesis, after they pick Koba, which scarred Bonobo, because he's been a veteran of labs. We get the idea he hates humans. And he has his eyes set on Jacobs. He knows Jacobs is like the leader of Genesis. He's the one that they first give the aerosol ALZ to. But he goes to reach for Jacobs in the test room. And by doing so, he rips the tube off of Chimp Handler Franklin's mask. Or rips his mask off in the tube off the machine. So the ALZ's going into the room and Franklin breathes it in. But they fix it, they put it back on Koba, and it puts him to sleep. Or he falls asleep. And then at several points through the film, we see Franklin, he coughs up blood. He's getting sick from breathing that in. And at one point, he even goes to James Franco's house when he's not home, and the neighbor's like, "Excuse me, who are you?" And he sneezes blood on the neighbor. It's like, the guy's an asshole, but to a point, you're just like, shit just keeps happening to him. So the apes storm the city. They free all the apes. You get this great shot of Jacobs walking into like this main area of Genesis, and he looks up. It's like this big round, a multi-floored room. All the apes standing there. They're all jumping down, or they're all bursting out of windows onto the street. They're throwing manhole lids and parking meters at cars. This great scene where they take like fence, like a gate posts. They kind of look like spears. They're throwing them at cars from roofs of buildings. Which upward angle of Caesar is after he throws like a gate post spear, and he just kind of, and they hand him another one. That was smart. And they're basically heading for the Golden Gate Bridge to get to the Redwoods. James Franco knows this. He's trying to get to the bridge, but now the cops are all over him. And the movie is very character and drama based up until the battle on the bridge. I mean, the havoc in the city is, a good setup for the action, but it's all building up for the stuff on the bridge. And they really do show how smart these apes are. Because like they're on the bridge, they know that there's like a roadblock of cops up here, so Caesar sends some of his apes up like the support wires up like the tower. And then he sends like the orangutans underneath the bridge so they're like going over the bridge this way while everyone is on the bridge. And then drop and come up and attack everyone from there. And, like great scenes of, there's like fog. Caesar's on a horse and he just like sits up. He's like, "Roar." When they all jump down and come up. It's awesome. And of course, Jacobs is in a helicopter, so he can point out the leader for them to shoot. Do I think this could really happen? Probably not, but Buck the gorilla, because they got like a helicopter gun just shooting all these apes. Buck like jumps off the bridge into the helicopter. Of course, it spirals and crashes. It's like hanging off the bridge. Jacobs is still alive. Caesar can't bring himself to kill him or save him, so he leaves it up to Koba, which Jacobs recognizes. Because Koba does threaten Jacobs at one point. He has like a computer screen in his room at Genesis, and he can like spell words out with his finger, like a touch screen. He spells out Jacobs, and he gives him like a look. The one thing I did find kind of funny during the Havoc on the Cities, we see a road sign with like black marker or paint that has the window frame design on it. It's just like, where did they get paint or ink to put that there? Anyway, it's just a little tiny thing. But James Franco probably knows where they're going because he goes to the sanctuary, sees that there's cops there. They see Malfoy's dead. They watch the security footage. The other guy tells Franco, like, your ape spoke. And just all this exciting stuff in the city, on the bridge. I mean, they like push a bus over, and they're like pushing the bus towards like the line of police that are shooting at it. And then that's when they drop from the support wires and come up from beneath. I did yell out in the theater because there's an ape called Wolfie that while he's climbing up to the tower of the bridge, helicopter shoots him and we see him fall off the bridge. I actually yelled out, "No!" In the theater because I was super into it. But eventually, it's going back to it. It is kind of slower paced. It does take a while to kind of, I will say Dawn and War does a better job with the apes and with the drama, the emotional gravitas, and how easily it is to get invested with these characters in this story, even when they're not speaking but just doing sign language. I will say this one is the slowest with that, but the payoff with all the stuff on the bridge is definitely worth it. And then, of course, they finally make it into the woods. James Franco shows up. Koba attacks him. Caesar fends him off. Franco tries telling him that, if you come with me, I can protect you. Come home. And Caesar pulls him in for a hug, and he tells him in his ear, Caesar is home. As if to say, I'll always love you, but I'm with my kind. I'm where I belong. I know my purpose now. And it ends with all the apes bowing down, putting their hands out for him to kind of, give his approval. Well, actually, no. It ends with him climbing up his favorite tree all the way up to the top and just looking out at the bridge in the distance with just the smoke and all the destruction that they caused. I think this is a great movie. Even though I say it's the worst of the trilogy or the least good, it's still very, very, very good. Even though the CG effects are very obvious, very standout, and not effective, it's still a good movie. And then we get a post-credit scene with the neighbor who got blood sneezed on, which we do find out Franklin died of his whatever sickness he got. The neighbor's at the airport. He's a pilot, and he goes to wipe his nose because he has a nosebleed and he's coughing, and a drop of blood goes on the floor. And the camera zooms in on the screen that says flights and terminals, and then we get like a map of the world with like a dot and a line to show like the flight, and when it hits we just see all these lines spurt off of it to all over the world to show that this virus is spreading and it's going to wipe out humanity and set us up for Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Which I did not see that in theaters. I did see these two. But for a while, this was the one I only wanted to watch because, I didn't really know why. I didn't really know where it was going to go after this because I didn't really know about Planet of the Apes. I didn't give the old series a try. I didn't even see these up until this was coming out. I bought this when this came out in theaters in 2017. And that's when I saw all 5 of these. But I love this movie. I love all the nods to earlier films. The framework of it being Caesar and sort of taking conquest and battle and using that as a launching point for a reboot. Yes, not all the Easter eggs and callbacks work. It's a Madhouse, Damn Dirty Ape. Those did not work. But all the seamless ones, like, the names like Maurice and Caesar and Rodman, or even just blatant Easter eggs, like him putting together a model of the Statue of Liberty. Which, one thing I did forget to say was, well, at one point, there's a TV in the primate sanctuary that's watching a Charlton Heston movie. So we get a glimpse of Charlton Heston. But also we get a news story of the launch of Icarus, Charlton Heston's ship. So, in a way, they are connected still. I mean, I think this wants to lead up to the first film. I don't know if it wants to create like an endless loop, but... And then I do believe that there is the Icarus pops up in the news story twice. Its launch and then it being lost in space. But it does mention Charlton Heston's ship. I think it even mentions astronaut Taylor is on it, which is his character. So, I appreciate all the nods. And I still like the CGI. Yes, it's obvious. Yes. No, it does not look like believable apes at any point at all. But it is a fun, well done, it does feel a little overly heavy in the emotional department with the humans being just as despicable as possible, especially Malfoy and the neighbor. Or even having some of the pre-intelligent apes being like Oz, like having their nails done. But I still think it's a great movie and just a great starting point to what I consider to be a perfect trilogy. So I will be doing these 2 next. And then at some point I will get to this series, which I also enjoy. And yeah, I'll rant on Tim Burton's at some point. But I've gone on long enough. This was Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I still love this movie. Thank you for watching.